Good morning to all. We will be starting in a few minutes. We're waiting on another one of our board members. And as we all know, sometimes we run a little bit behind. So we'll give him a few more minutes to get here. Thank you for your patience. Good morning. We call the Buchanan County Board of Supervisors work session to order. We will have roll call. Ms. Watkins, please.
Mr. Evelyn?
Here.
Mr. Tiller? Here. Ms. Page?
Here.
Mr. Steers?
Here.
And Mr. Lockwood?
Here.
Thank you. First on the agenda is the Virginia Public School Authority 2020 bond sale agreement. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This morning you have before you, and you should have just received it. It should be sitting at your seat, a revised resolution, R-15-R2, authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $26 million general obligation school bond of the County of New Kent, Virginia, to be sold to the Virginia Public Authority and providing for the form and details thereof. This is a resolution that, a revised resolution that we're asking you to consider and adopt this morning, which will supersede the resolution that you previously adopted at your September 8th meeting. The difference in this resolution is the amount. I believe the previous resolution, there was a not to exceed amount of $37 million. Since that meeting, we've been working closely with the schools, and Davenport and Associates, Ted, has some additional information to present to you on the most recent school project total. In order to move forward with the financing, the next step in the process will be for the county to sign a bond sale agreement, which I'll also be asking for authority to execute that agreement. That agreement is due October 6th, so it's coming up within less than a week. That will lock us in to an amount. We won't know the rate until the bonds actually sell, and I believe the sales date, I'm looking at Ted, is the 20th. That's when we will know the actual rate. We are projecting a 1.63 rate right now, 1.63% rate right now. So if Ted can come forward and present on the new project total, which we are looking at now, a project of $34.7 million total.
Got a very brief update on the Vpsa interest rates. That would be helpful, I think, as you think about the resolution. So you did hold your public
Thank you.
hearing. That's all fine. That's done. This updated resolution would be your final action. Pardon?
You had it on, you were right.
Yeah, okay, I'm on.
No,
Good.
no, no.
The
You're not.
microphone.
Red is good? Yeah, now I hear it. Okay. So the public hearing has taken place. This is a resolution that would amend or supersede the resolution you adopted on, I think it was the 8th, and this would be your final action. The school board has done what they need to do. As county administrator said, the final paperwork to Vpsa is due on the 6th. They sell their bonds on the 20th. That's the date where the interest rates are locked in. And a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks later is when the money is made available. But the rates are locked on October 20th. What I just passed around, I'd suggest we look at the middle column, which is the 20-year financing. The resolution does allow us to go out 30 years, but it's a not to exceed. So there's been no discussion at all about going 30 years. We've really kind of gravitated towards the 20-year term. What you're going to see under that middle column, I think one of the line items most important is line 13. It's called Project Fund. What these numbers are assuming is when we close, you all walk away with $22.35 million for the project. And as I understand it, there's been a lot of work being done over the last several weeks about fine-tuning the project budget, identifying savings. We know that the county has cash that they're planning to contribute to the to the project. So the borrowing component would be funding approximately $22.35 million, and you would also have enough to pay any issuance costs. But $22.35 is what these numbers are based on, and you'll see that under current interest rate assumptions for Vpsa, the annual debt service is a little over $1.3 million. Reality is, back when budgets were being developed, I think the debt was being estimated and budgeted at about $1,450,000. So we're well below that, and you could, if you so chose, to even shorten this loan by a year or two to get closer back to that $1,450,000 annual payment if you wanted to. We have that flexibility. We just know we can't go longer than 30 years, but there's no limitation on going 20 years, or if you said, look, these rates are attractive, we can actually maybe go 19 years as an example. The payment would go up, but it would, we'd have to do the math and make sure it doesn't go up to a level beyond what was in the budget of $1,450,000. But for now, 20 years is kind of what's been discussed. We still got about 3 weeks, but we're at $1,315,000 per year, And as Rodney said on line 7, the all-in interest cost, which takes into account the interest rates, the issuance costs, and the VPSA annual fee, it's about a $163 fixed for 20 years. This would be prepayable after year 10. Okay? The resolution has a not to exceed par amount of 26. It's a not to exceed. The other key parameters in the resolution are what we call requested proceeds. So we know that the issuance amount can't go above 26. We're nowhere near that right now. We're actually around 20 million. So we're not going to go up to that 26 million. It's a parameter. It's a not to exceed parameter. As I said earlier, we know we can go out 30 years. There's no expectations we will. We're going to be closer to 20. There's a not to exceed interest rate of 3%. We're virtually half of that right now, so it's a parameter. We're not, barring some major disruption in the bond market, we wouldn't expect to be anywhere near 3%. And then the final, maybe most important parameter is requested proceeds. And on this sheet I handed out, the requested proceeds would be lines 13 and 14 together. That's 22.5 million, right? It means you close, you get 22.5. There's an estimated 150 of issuance costs. You pay that, and what you're left with is 22,350. The resolution says that our requested proceeds shall not exceed 23,850,000. So we've even got room there, and the thought was set that up as a not to exceed for your resolution, and as things continue to evolve on the project budget, working with the county administrator and staff, we just give VPSA a fine-tuned number that said, hey, we want to walk away with whatever the number is, 22.5, as long as it's not above the parameters that were included in the resolution. So we've tightened the parameters down a bit, but there's still a little bit of latitude as things are evolving on the project cost. Any questions?
Do we have any questions of
Mr. Page, I have a question.
Mr. Steers?
Mr. Cole, who will be the actual person that we selling the bonds? What firm?
VPSA is, I believe what they are planning to do is offer these bonds in what we call a competitive sale. That's their discretion. And they will be taking bids from bond underwriting firms for buying these bonds on October 20th. They'll be awarding it to the low bidder, and that underwriting firm, whoever it is that wins it, will ultimately be selling it to investors, whether it's individuals or institutions like bond funds and insurance companies and such. So these bonds will ultimately end up in the hands of many individual investors that are buying the bonds from the bond underwriting firm that wins the bid on the 20th. So it's called a competitive sale. That's usually how VPSA does these. It's hard to know we don't know which underwriting firm will win the bid.
Okay.
We won't know that till the 20th.
Do we know how many different counties are involved in seeking funding?
It's a great question. I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can.
11.
Okay. 11 different issuers within the pool.
And would everyone's rates be the same, or is it
Yes.
everyone? No, 11, Mr. Evelyn, all 11
Right.
bonds.
Now,
will be
you
issued
might
at
have
the
a
sa- at the
county in
same
there
rate.
that only wants to do 15-year.
Right.
But for that first 15 years and your first 15 years, they'd be the same.
Okay.
And it's all being priced. The bonds are being priced off of the credit of the VPSA program, which is AAA, AA, and AAA. It's kind of a hybrid, but it is not based on the New Kent component versus the name some other county.
Right.
Everybody
Okay.
is the same.
Thank you.
Will the closing costs be the same for each locality?
No, those are based off of the size of each locality's issuance within the pool.
I don't understand that.
So there's two levels of costs. There's really three levels of costs. There's your local fixed costs, which is the 150. That is specific to New Kent. There will be an underwriting charge on line 15, which we're estimating at $98,000. That is based on the size of the of your transaction. So if you had a larger borrowing within Vpsa, that dollar amount would go higher, and it would go lower if you had a smaller borrowing. And then everybody pays what we call 5 basis point charge to Vpsa. They add that to the interest rate, and that is a source of revenue or income for the Vpsa program over the term of the debt. Everybody pays the same charge on that. Again, it will vary how big your loan is and how long it is, but the charge is 5 basis points for everybody. And all of that has been calculated into these estimates. And just while we're talking about that, I mean, if the county were to go out and do their own borrowing for this, there would be an equivalent of that 150 local costs. You would still have an underwriting cost, which is the equivalent of that line 15, and then you would have some other costs associated with ratings and things of that nature that you don't have to do here because you're part of the Vpsa program, and that's really part of the rationale behind their 5 basis point annual charge. That you're saving other costs by going through the pool program. You're getting access to AAA rates when maybe you're only a AA rated county, and that annual fee is set up to compensate for their expenses at Vpsa and the fact that you are foregoing certain expenses because you're not doing your own transaction.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, if I could, in your packet, there is a proposed motion which needs to be amended. Since preparing the agenda request form, we developed the revised resolution that you have before you. And actually, with the adoption of the resolution, that authorizes myself and the chair to sign the bond sale agreement. So the motion prepared in your packet is no longer needed. We only need to adopt Resolution R-1520R2.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Evelyn?
no one on this board was sitting here when the Farms of New Kent or Patriots Landing were adopted back in the early 2000s. Back in 2007, the population of this county was 17,000, a little over. Today it's over 23,000. So we've had a lot of growth over the past 15, 16 years. In 2013, some of us were on this board, and we knew that we were going to have to build an elementary school. So we started putting money aside. And all of us on the board now have been putting money aside since we've all been on here. We've put over $12 million towards this project because we knew we needed a school. That school was, 8 years ago, was priced around $28 million. There was no water and sewer. I went back and looked at CIP proposals, no water and sewer in that price at the $28 million. This school proposal has water and sewer, which I definitely think we need. Also, inflation on $28 million from 2016 to 2020 would be over $1.1 million. So, from 2016 to 2020, there have been 874 building permits. This year alone, we have 206 building permits. When the school got their first price, I don't think either board was very happy about it. $38 million. I think we're all shocked. But since that time, we've been through COVID and we've been through a lot. Both boards have worked together to try to get the cost of the school down. Did everybody get what they want? No, on either side. Was everybody happy all the time? No. Did we get along all the time? No. But at the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the citizens and the students of New Kent County. So the school started at $38 million. The school board came back with us with a price of a little over $35 million with reductions in engineering. They took $245,000 from trailers, and stepping up to the table, they decided to cut the auxiliary gym that would be used for a lot of community uses. Did they want to do that? I know they didn't want to do that, but I think it was an olive branch sent out to us and to the citizens of this county that they know the times are tight and they would do everything they can to cut the cost of this project. They also were going to throw in $860,000 in one-time money over 2 years. But working with the school board superintendent, they've agreed, instead of, we didn't like it to be put over 2 years, so we felt like one-time money for 1 year, let's get this project done. They could come up with $500,000 to put into this project. So working with superintendent, county administrator, chair, vice chairs, total board, we've got this project under $35 million. And I think that is a good price for this school at this time. You cannot get cheaper money at 1.6%. I mean, that is great money. We all know, and I don't think anybody on this board disagrees that we need a school. I've heard everybody say that. So I'm ready. If there's no other discussion, I think we need to make a motion. Get this thing. It's been going on long enough. Let's pass it, get it going forward, and let's get some dirt moving.
Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Are there any more comments? Mr. Steers?
Yes, I would like to reiterate exactly what Mr. Evelyn said. And back, I think it was on March 13th, I was the supervisor that proposed to postpone the building of the school. And I talked to our financial advisors, and he told me that he thought that was a wise decision, but would not be a popular decision. And I'm not here to run a popularity contest. But I agree with everything Mr. Evans said. We've met with the school board individually. We've met with the superintendent. We've worked together. We've got the price down. Money will never be cheaper than this. Building costs are going up. And I think it speaks wisely of this board, too, that we've known this for years and we have been stashing money aside. And so I think now is the time. It's still not the price I like, but if we can do all this and compromise with the school board and build a $35 million school and not raise taxes, I think that's the best way to go. Thank you.
Any other comments? Two words run clear with me. One is compromise, and the other one is to work together. I think that I had a list almost as long as Mr. Evelyn had, so thank you, Mr. Evelyn, and several times rewrote it. One thing that I can say is that through this entire process, I think, and I hope and I pray that lessons were learned. I do know that phrases were thrown out there, so at the end of the day, when you are doing your due diligence and saving for a project such as this, then you aren't just kicking a can down the road or throwing things to the side or ignoring it, but you're doing what we do as good stewards. Absolutely, I've heard the housing numbers. The majority of them will be coming out of District 3. Thank God the majority of District 3 is age restricted. And so just want to throw that out there. And just to let you know that I don't believe that we have a member that sits on the Board of Supervisors that does not support education of our youth in New Kent County, and that don't support the school board. And that is shown more times, and more sacrifices have been made throughout the budget process for the county to make sure that we have funding for our schools without putting hardships on all of our citizens. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion if there's no more comments. The motion in the agenda says not to borrow up to 24 million. Does that need to be changed to 26? What?
No, we're going to do a motion
Yes,
on the resolution
actually,
number.
the motion in the agenda is no longer valid.
We're going to do the resolution number.
Right, it's just to adopt the resolution.
R-15-20, R2.
R2.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Evelyn?
I move to adopt resolution R-15-20, R2 to access $26 million to the construction of a new elementary school.
Thank you, Ms. Evelyn. Because I'm going to be signing this, have you reviewed this?
I have, Madam Chair, and it's been reviewed by bond counsel as well.
Thank you. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Evelyn,
Aye.
Mr. Tiller,
Aye.
Mr. Steers,
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood,
Aye.
and Ms. Page.
Aye. Moving on to item number 2, refunding of Series 2012B and 2012C to Virginia Resource Authority for the VRA bonds. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. At your last meeting, Mr. Coles presented to you a refunding, which is also a form of refinancing, opportunity for 2 previously issued bonds, 2012B and 2012C bonds issued with the Virginia Resource Authority. These bonds were issued to expand service to Bottoms Bridge. They also included the upgrade of the Chickahominy treatment plant, as well as the construction of a pump station at Talliesville. I believe Mr. Coles has some updated information for you.
Yep. Thank you. Just pass this around, and as Rodney said, the potential refunding of these 2012s, actually this all dates back to 2004 when we first did that large revenue bond issuance for utilities throughout the county. So the 2004 bonds were refunded in 2012. We did part of them in the 2012 Bs, and we did part of them as the 2012 Cs. We have never extended the final maturity throughout any of these refundings. And so what we're talking about is refunding the 2012s through the Virginia Resources Authority that will be selling their bonds on October 28th. Somewhat similar process to what the Virginia Public School Authority does, a little bit different, but you get to about the same place, which is leveraging off of their very high ratings, going out to the bond community and locking in fixed rates for the entire term of the debt. So again, we're matching the maturity of the 2012s. We're not extending, we're not shortening. The resolution for you all to consider does have some parameters in there. I think the most important parameter, because this is a refunding, is on page 2 in the first whereas paragraph, that is saying that the debt service savings from this refunding shall not be less than, and it's bracketed, 3% present value savings. That is a way that we often measure refunding efficiencies, and the value of a refunding is as a percentage of savings, as a percent of what we're refunding. All of the other parameters are very much in line with the size of the transaction. With a refunding, we're only going to issue as much debt, literally to the penny, as you need to pay off the old debt. And the final maturity will be the same as what the bonds have currently. So a fairly straightforward resolution in that regard. And I thought it would be helpful just to share with you an update on where the market is. And I think you've seen enough of this before. Maybe we can go to page 3, which is the refunding of the 2012 Bs. The key statistics are on the left-hand side of the page. So we're going to be paying off a little under $5 million of debt here. The call date is out in November of 2022, so this is what we call an advance refunding. When the bonds sell, we lock in the interest rates on the 28th of October. The money comes a couple, 2-3 weeks later. That money is set in a escrow specific to New Kent County, and that escrow is sized to the penny to pay the debt service on the 2012 B bonds. The county, they are what we call legally defeased at that point. You no longer have an obligation to these bonds. You will be servicing what we'll be calling the 2020 bonds. On the 2020 bonds, I'm on page 3 on the left. If you look at line 12, that's about what we're seeing in the current market, about a 1.5%. So we are just simply reducing interest rates. And based on our estimates, which we believe are very accurate, we can accurately measure a VRA bond issue in any given day pretty well. We're seeing gross savings of about $445,000. In today's dollars, you're going to recognize that $445,000 year by year. At about $45,000 per year. You can see that on the right-hand side. That's not all going to come at once. It's just simply reducing the annual payment for the remaining roughly 10 years here at about $45,000 a year. In today's dollars, it's about $420,000, and that key not net present value percentage, line 18, is about 8.5%. So we have a resolution that says it shall not be less than 3%. 3% is a fairly common minimum level of savings for a municipal bond refunding, but there's no reason you couldn't consider raising that parameter, so say 4% or 5% if you wanted to, meaning we don't move forward unless we can achieve that minimum level, whatever the number is, currently 3%. For this particular series of bonds, the 12 Bs, were actually at about 8.5%. Page 4 is set up much the same, but it's the 12 Cs. Remember, when in 2012, when we refunded the 04s, we did some of the 04s through the 12 Bs, and we came back and did others through the 12 Cs. Now we're talking about refunding both the 12 Bs and the 12 Cs into a single 2020 bond. So we look at these separately. In this case, we've got savings of about $440,000 over the remaining term of these bonds. It's about $30,000 a year. And on line 18, the present value savings are just under 8%, 7.9%. And then you go to page 5, and it's got both of them together. This is what the impact would be, or the savings would be, to the utility budget for debt service if we refunded these at the current rates. We're talking for the next several years, somewhere around $75,000 a year, and then it steps down to about $30,000 a year. In total, we're estimating over the remaining life about $886,000. If you did this transaction, those rates would be fixed, the payments would be known to the penny, and you would have, again, a 10-year no prepayment language for what we're calling the 2020 bonds. So there's a chance at the call date, which would be 2030, maybe there's a chance to refund the remaining portion. Who knows? Time will tell. But we know this would lock us out of doing a refunding for 10 years. And that's oftentimes the hardest question about these sorts of things is, could we do better by waiting later? And the unknown, obviously, there is, what do interest rates do? We are not at the absolute lows, but we're pretty close to the historical lows in the municipal bond market. That doesn't mean they can't go lower, but from where we sit and the county's policies and what is normally sort of deemed to be reasonable and acceptable in the municipal bond market, these both line up very nicely. The savings are strong when we measure it as a percent, the net present value. So we think it's a very viable transaction. There's a few other schedules in here that we can cover here on page 6. We talk about how much the savings would move if rates move up or move down. That's what's shown under columns C and D. So we know between now and October 28th, rates are going to move around. They've been very, very steady for the last 3 weeks, but any number of events could occur that would cause them to move. We just have to live with that risk of rate movement between now and October 28th. And then columns E and F are trying to give you a little perspective on, what if we wait? Could we do better by waiting? And if you go all the way out to column F, we are waiting till 2022 to do this refunding. And if rates stay exactly where they are today, rather than $886,000 of savings, you would be saving about $1,660,000. So waiting for that 2-year period where we get to the call date for the 12 bonds, and if rates stay the same, we almost double our savings. Obviously, the unknown is, what do rates do between now and then? And line 4 there on page 6 gives you some perspective that rates could move about 1.27% higher. And if you waited and rates moved 1.27% higher, you'd break even to what you could do today. And it's just impossible to know whether rates might move that amount in that period of time. 2 years, we have seen in different 2-year periods historically, we have seen rates move higher and lower by 1.27% in 24 months. Just don't know whether that would be the case from the fall of 20 to the fall of 22. So hindsight will be 2020. When you go back and you look at this and say, look, when would have been the absolute best time to refund this? We won't know that answer until several years from now, but I do believe the transaction is valid. It meets all of our marks of what the bond market would normally consider to be reasonable. It meets your policies. And it does provide some debt service relief to the utility fund for the next roughly 15 years. Any questions on this?
Yes, Mr. Sears.
So once again, we're eliminating a well out at Brickshire, tying that into
Here we go.
tying that into Farms of New Kent, and now here we're going to reduce $886,000 in savings. When does that affect water rates?
Well, reducing the annual debt service for the utility system will take pressure off of water rates. And
I don't mean pressure, I mean price.
Will take pressure off of the rates. It'll reduce the need to raise rates. All
I'm
other things
looking
being
at
held
lowering
constant.
rates, not having to
And as
raise them. I'm
we
looking at
know,
lowering them.
debt service is just a part of that math, right?
Right.
We've got usage and flow and connection availability. So this transaction would not be putting pressure to raise rates, all other things being equal. It would allow rates to be reduced. It's just a question of whether all those other components of the utility financials further support that or not.
Well, I just hope that this board, before we adopt next year's budget, we'll sit down and seriously look at the water rates. I think they're way too high, and I think there's some ways we can cut the rates. And I know that's not you, that's this board, but I hope you'll help us with that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we try to give that perspective every year, and maybe we need to just take a fresh look at what we're doing. And,
Right.
And I think absolutely be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Happy to help in doing that.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions, comments? Chair is ready for a motion. Mr. Steers?
Madam Chair, I move to adopt Resolution R-38-20 approving the proposed water and sewer system revenue refunding bond sold to the Virginia Resources Authority.
Thank you, Mr. Steers. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye. Thank you. Item 3 is the New Kent County Emergency Operation Plan Update Adoption, and that's Fire Chief Bricker Pack. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Patrick Way.
Where are y'all getting all this paper from?
Keep
He
those loggers in
smiles.
business, right?
Every time I say it, he starts smiling.
Well, good morning. As you all are aware, every 4 years, each local and jurisdiction agency in the Commonwealth conducts a comprehensive review and revision of its emergency operations plan to ensure that the plan remains current and the revised plan shall be formally adopted by you all. It's hard to believe that we're back here 4 years. It felt like just yesterday that I was here to get us approved from the 2012 version. But as you know, the plan consists of the basic plan, which is before you, and then 2 other volumes. Volume 2 is our emergency support functions. That's actually how our folks operate within the EOC, divided all those functions that we need in the emergency that are divided out into 17 individual functions with a hybrid ICS model. And then volume 3 is our hazard-specific annex, and that is they are planned specifically for specific hazards, i.e. tornadoes, hurricanes, hurricane evacuation, storms, hazardous materials, etc. Epidemiology, as we know, we're in full effect right now. So if we turn to page Roman numeral 4, you will see kind of the changes that have evolved from 2016, 2017, and if you go to change number 21 is kind of where we start today of the changes that we made to the current emergency operation plan. Change 21, this is kind of, we've updated our emergency services to emergency management. There's a lot of reference in here to emergency services, and that was some old terminology that was used prior to 2012, and we've just changed that to emergency management. Change number 22, we've identified method used to update demographics between a decadal U.S. Census reports provided September 2020 update as an example. As you know, we get updates regularly from our folks downstairs in planning, and that is based off of our Commonwealth, the UVA, and we also included that this year in our plan. We go still back to the 2010 census, but we all know that that census is a little outdated of what's really going on here, so we also included what we include on a monthly basis here in the county. Change number 23, we added integrated public alert and warning system, or IPAWS. That is where we can interrupt phone signal if we need to, as well as the new Kent County Alert system. So we've added some new nuances into that language. Change 24, we added basic plan, community lifelines, emergency operation zones. And these are all key terms: hazard mitigation plan, the NIMS, the National Response Framework, recovery response and threat, and updated our situation report. Over the past 3 years, we've created disaster zones as an overlay in our GIS. So if we do get a widespread event, we can divide out into disaster zones within the county and operate within them. And that's one of the major initiatives we put into that change there. Change number 25, again, we replaced the National Response Plan with the National Response Framework that was changed in DHS, and we put that down. Change 26, we updated federal and Virginia legislative authorities and references to planning guidance, as well as Commonwealth and New Kent emergency plans. Change 27, we updated and deleted emergency services with emergency management again, just some verbiage there. Change 28, we updated text as needed, explicitly correct for grammar, syntax, any other errors, and enhanced readability. And then change 29, we updated obviously the chair of the board, supervisors, and all that, which that's an ongoing annual change that we do every year. Obviously, this is a draft that's in front of you of the emergency. You'll still see some reference on the cover. We didn't want to make the final plans for the 2020 version until this is approved by you all. So that's kind of where we are going forward. The next 2-3 years, we're going to really dissect Volume 2 and Volume 3. Again, emergency management is evolving by the day, especially now with COVID and how we operate virtually, as well as in an emergency operations center. Those are some of the things that we'd be taking a look at and how we actually really do operate. And then secondly, adjusting our hazard-specific annexes. Again, we're being dealt the hand of all kind of different new threats and risks in the county, and we're going to evolve with that as well going forward. So that's kind of the update for the emergency operations plan for 2020 and going forward. Again, we're going to look in the next 2-3 years to do a really good global dive into the Volume 2 and Volume 3.
Do we have any questions of Chief or Pat? You entertain a motion?
Was this draft, or you want a motion on this?
Yeah, we have to just move forward in.
Okay, so you had the
for the changes. This will be our 2020 plan moving forward for the next 4 years.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Tiller.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the updates as stated within the August 2020 Record of Changes document to the New Kent County Emergency Operations Plan to serve as an updated plan for any emergencies that warrant activation of the plan pursuant to the Code of Virginia 44-146.19.
Thank you, Mr. Tiller. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I have the draft back?
What? You can take it back?
You'll have a new one when it's printed.
Oh, my God.
We're going to recycle.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Item 4, appropriate from the utility fund balance $100,000 for Perm Landing, WWTP Basin, 1A rehabilitation, and we don't have Mr. Dang. Good morning.
Good morning. Madam Chairman, Board. This is being requested, the supplemental appropriation is being requested for a couple of different reasons. Normally, this would have been part of the CIP. However, due to timing of the rehabilitation that we've already began last year, what we did was we took all of the treatment processes and moved it from one basin to Basin 1B. In the process, we found that there was extensive work that needed to be done in Basin 1A, which was the basin that we have been using for the previous 9 years. What has moved this forward so fast was the amount of flow that the plant is receiving now for the last year. We've increased on an average per day of about 90,000 gallons. And so when you have that kind of increase, and we don't see that slowing down due to the fact of all the houses that are being built and people connecting to our system, and then we have to be ready to move to dual basin mode in the very near future. So timing is against us as well as flow. And so if we waited for these monies to be appropriated later, it's going to take about 6 months to, once the word is given, it's going to take about 6 months for us to complete the project. By that time, if we waited to after July of next year, we would be way beyond what the basin's capacity to treat can do right now. One basin can only treat 500,000 gallons per day, and right now our average is about 440,000 gallons per day. So if it exceeded 90,000 in 1 year, by the time we get to next year, we'll be way beyond that. And we want to keep our reputation as good stewards of the environment. And so we need these monies in order to rehab the basin and be ready to go in the need that in the event that this does come. Any questions without getting too scientific?
I'm just curious, do you attribute some of this increase because a lot of the residents in New Kent leave the county for work? And a lot of people have been staying home over the last 6 months. Would you attribute a fair amount to that cause?
I would say maybe about 20% during the day. We can see it in our water flow going out, but yes, some of it coming in as well.
Any other questions? Chair recognizes our motion. Are you ready for the motion?
I think it was $100,000 your money, Ron. Madam Chair.
I know it, right?
I'm not going to ask any questions. Okay? Thank you.
Madam Chair.
No wonder you didn't want to make that motion.
I move to appropriate from the utility fund balance $100,000 for Param Landings wastewater treatment basin 1A rehabilitation.
Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Lockwood,
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn,
Aye.
Mr. Tiller,
Aye.
Mr. Steers,
Aye.
and Ms. Page.
Aye. Thank you, and stand right in your seat. Discussion of disconnection of non-payment of water bills.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Dame regrets he can't be here. He had a death in the family, so.
Please send our condolences.
Definitely an issue that's important to him and me as well is, making sure that folks are able to continue water service, especially people experiencing hardship during the pandemic. I'm sure you guys know Public Utilities has delayed disconnections for non-payment. We are not assessing fees, late fees, and that sort of thing since March. And that was prior to the governor issuing a statewide ban on disconnections. Since then, that ban has ended on August 31st. There's some legislation bouncing around in the Senate and the House at the state level that would require public utilities like ours to develop a repayment plan to get folks back up to zero balance on their accounts. So we've run the math on our end. Jennifer did some work last week to kind of get an update, and as of September 22nd, and I don't believe this has changed since then, we had 123 customers who basically have not made a payment since March. 99 residents, 16 renters, 2 home builders, and 6 businesses. The total there is about $31,630. It could be as little as $30 on the account and as much as $863 for residents. A couple businesses are over $1,000. So we have had a few folks come in and set up repayment plans on their own under our existing repayment plan. But we'd like to come up with a pandemic-specific repayment plan. So what we have proposed here is an agreement, a written agreement with those customers. They would be mailed a notice stating we do have a repayment plan. You have other options. The other option is to contact social services. They can assist in certain situations and make the payment directly to public utilities. But under our repayment plan, we would give folks a year to repay, divide their past due balance up evenly over a year. So it's going to be a regular payment. They will have a signed agreement. And of course, with everything, there will be terms and conditions to that agreement. And they're pretty strict, basically, that they will make that payment on time. They will keep their existing payments current. So moving forward, they will pay their existing water bills on time. Of course, no bounce checks or anything like that. So all those conditions would terminate the agreement, and the balance due would be due immediately. So what we're proposing is that letter, that first notice. If they don't contact us after 15 days, a second notice. And if they don't contact us after another 15 days, they're going to be sent a final notice that utilities are going to be disconnected. Unfortunately, we have several customers who just don't pay their bill until we turn the water off. And that's not due to the pandemic. That's just their regular way of doing business. So that's how we get their attention. That's how we get them to get in touch with us. So certainly we don't want to turn anyone off that is in a hardship, but we do want to put it back there on the customer to reach out to utilities and set up a payment plan. Let me see if I have any other notes here. So currently, state code allows for all this. Not legislation, but in the budgets. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Brendan. My understanding of this, they're adding into the budget at the state level in the General Assembly that there would be a moratorium on disconnections. Public utilities would be exempt if the amount that is past due, the total amount past due, is greater than 1% of annual operating revenue. Our $31,630 is not greater than 1% of operating revenue. So we would not be exempt. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's language in the House and Senate budget, and I think the House budget that just passed, that would extend a moratorium on cutoffs until the end of the pandemic. And since you would be under 1%, you would not be exempt from that. So you could not, if this passes the budget and is approved by the governor, then you would not be able to shut off until the end of the pandemic.
Right, correct. So nonetheless, we'd like to get the opportunity for the repayment plan out there to folks in writing, let them know we are keeping an eye on things, and we are offering a potential fix for them. Ultimately, the utility doesn't run on promises and goodwill, it runs on revenue. So we have to do everything we can to collect. We know we've had a few, we've confirmed a few who didn't pay their bill, moved out, and are gone. That's probably going to be a write-off if we can't catch up with them. So this is just a method to help get that revenue back in and raise awareness among people that we can't extend this indefinitely.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Evelyn?
do y'all have like some type of collecting agency for people like that they get a percentage of it if they try to collect it?
We do not. We do everything we can, and working with Brendan to get the collections in.
But there's nothing that saying they can't do that, is it, Brendan?
They can hire somebody and they would have to pay for it, yeah.
I know I know that there's people out there that they will not, they won't charge anything until they collect something. They just take a percentage off of it.
Yeah.
If it's a large amount, I know sometimes if it's a small amount, I understand it's not worth fighting. But I would think I would look into that if it was some larger amounts. Just something to think about.
That's an option that we haven't really discussed. Hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Right.
We can work with folks and get them back up to speed. But typically, by that time, we've cut them off. And if you don't have water, you've moved out. I mean, they're gone. So
Right.
that's really where we would need their help, is finding people who have kind of skipped town.
The only other comment I'd have, Mike, is that I think the term of the repayment plan is in line with the budget amendments, but we may want to wait and make sure that we know what the budget amendments actually say before we go forward with this, since they would apply to you, and they do require, certain requirements in the repayment plan that's currently in there.
Do you know when they expect to pass the budget?
Unfortunately, I do not. They've been meeting since August, and
I understand.
There's no real deadline for it.
Madam Chair,
So, yes, Mr. Sears.
if we had lower water rates,
Here we go.
anyway, I spoke with Dominion Power yesterday because they've done the same thing that we've done by not shutting off the power and stuff like that. And the lady I spoke with is Crystal Bright, and she said that their response to disconnected customers, the State Corporation Commission wanted to end it on September 16th. The Governor Northam requested the SEC to extend it until at least October 5th, which is Monday. And that they have come up with some kind of long-term repayment plan for the customers. So, I guess it depends on how much they are in arrears. Is a year going to be enough to continue making monthly payments and paying the arrear?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. We just have to see where folks are with the thing.
What is the average bill? Do you know the average bill of those that are in arrear?
I do not. I think it's generally low, relatively, on that scale of 38 to 830. I'd say it's closer to 100, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
have these customers been referred to social services if they're having some hardship? Because we do have a bill forgiveness program we funded with COVID money.
Have not formally yet. That would be the first bullet point in our letter that we send to them. You may contact social services and they will review your situation and could make a direct payment to public utilities. So,
Okay.
and that's certainly something we encourage folks to consider. But I imagine they don't have enough money to pay all of these bills. So.
surely the board is appreciative of the efforts to collect. One of my questions you answered, are there people on there that normally just don't pay their bill anyway?
There are.
Of course, we know that. I do think that we should make an effort to try to collect. I mean, I think that given a year should be ample time, but also to give other resources of how they may pay their bill. I think that that's showing goodwill.
Correct.
And trying to help. So we're appreciative of your plan. We'll be calling on you again to see how it's working. And I guess we wait for legislation to tell us what we can and can't do, sir.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Next on the agenda is the Broadband Advisory Committee Charter. Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've given you a copy in your packet of the Broadband Advisory Charter, which is Resolution R-16-19. Usually in most of our charters, we establish a set time for charters to expire. This one we did not. We left it at the will of the board. This charter was adopted over a year ago in May of 2019. So I thought this would be a good time to review that charter and to see if there's any additional guidance that we'd like to provide to the Broadband Advisory Committee. They have accomplished a lot, and they've been very active. They worked with, back in 2019, Rural Broadband Consulting, who the county contracted with to provide a broadband strategy, and they worked very closely with that group to develop a very detailed and a very good strategic plan for the county as it relates to broadband. I think this plan, and I've even received comments from other localities of how good that plan was, and it really shows where we are right now as it relates to broadband in the county. The Broadband Advisory Committee has also been before you on several occasions too, presenting their recommendations of forming a broadband authority. You recently have taken the action to move forward with a financial feasibility study that will look at the cost involved in that, and it will lay out a business model for the operation of a broadband authority. Talked to the consultant last week, and we anticipate that process is going to take about 6 weeks to complete. And we'll see what the numbers come back as. If the numbers look good, I imagine the next step would be to move forward with the with the actual engineering of the expansion of a broadband system. So that's where we are, and how much you want the Broadband Advisory Committee to be involved in future processes is totally up to you. As you can see, the purpose in the charter is very vague. So if there is some additional and more detailed guidance you'd like to give this group, now is the time. And definitely we don't have to make a decision today, but I did want us to start looking at that and thinking about the direction that we could get to this group.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mr. Lockwood?
Well, yes, I would, number one, like to applaud the Broadband Advisory Committee for the work they did and the dedication they showed toward this project. I think they've done a very thorough job coming up with numbers. I think they've expressed all along that they would like someone like Design 9 to go through and verify their numbers for them. So I think we've taken the right steps as a board. I think we should pretty much leave the committee intact. We still have a ways to go. We've got a proposal, but we don't have a solution yet. And I think with the dedication that they've shown, I think it would be wise for us to continue with the advisory committee, wait for the results of the financial study, and get their input from there. I think it would be good also for the
on I-9 to consult with the committee, and just go back and forth. You can do a Zoom meeting or however they want to do it, but I think we should, at least for the 6 weeks we're talking about having this financial feasibility study done, we should continue with the advisory committee as it stands. Thank you.
Any more comments or suggestions? I had the opportunity on several occasions to hear the presentation from the advisory committee. Not only that, I've had several meetings, and in the meetings, I heard the comments of Mr. Jeremiah when he said that the Broadband Advisory Committee has completed, to his knowledge, the task that was given, and their task was to give recommendations to the county, in which they have done. I am in agreement with Mr. Lockwood as that they have dedicated and committed a lot of their time to this project, and for that we are truly appreciative and applaud their commitment and their dedication to a project as important as broadband. I do think that when I spoke to them, they have not been meeting as a group. They are waiting on directions. It is getting close to holiday time, and all of those other things. I do think as a board that we have utilized a lot of their time in doing this, and I think that it would be appropriate if we would I guess the word is disband the broadband committee. Have spoken with several of the committee members that will come back if will review projects or give their advice or their voice, and we do know that they do have a voice on any of the findings that we have. So it would be my request that we would absolutely give gratitude and appreciation of all of their work, and that we would disband the Broadband Advisory Committee at this time.
Ms. Page, I would just like to add that I've also spoken to several members of the committee, and they've expressed their desire to stay together as a group and see the project through to its completion, which would, in my mind, be we actually have a plan.
So what is their completion?
That we actually have a plan that we're enacting, that they've been working on, whether it's a broadband authority or some other means of providing service throughout the county. So if they're not currently meeting because they don't have anything waiting for information to come back from the consultant we hired, then we're not really taking up any more of their time at this point. So I think we should leave it intact, at least through the end of the year, maybe through the end of the what was it, May that they were brought together? May of 19?
May 13th, 2019.
Okay. I don't know that we gain anything by separating it or breaking it up, disbanding it. That isn't really going to cost the county anything to keep it intact. And if they're still intact, then they can be brought together as a committee to offer advice or review information.
Ms. Page, I would tend to agree with you. I think they've done a good job. We're going to be looking at this new plan, and we might need to add some new people and set up a new charter after that's done. So I have a motion.
Yes, Mr.
No more
Evelyn.
discussion. I moved in the Broadband Advisory Committee charter as of today.
Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members?
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
No.
Ms. Page?
Aye. Thank you. Item 7 is FY20 supplementary appropriations. Hi,
Good
how are
morning.
you?
Okay.
Okay.
Items 7 through 10 are supplemental appropriations and budget transfers.
Oh, you're going to come your first time to do multiple items.
Am I allowed to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Try to make it a little quicker. Most of these you see monthly. They're regular supplemental appropriations and budget transfers. Others are part of our closing process. We clean up our chart of accounts at the end of the year, and you'll see budget transfers going from accounts that are negative, so we don't carry forward any negative balances. I believe you've seen all of them except for 2 items, and those are also part of our cleaning up process at the end of the year. Those will be included as item 7, but if you have any particular questions, be happy to answer them. Okay.
I'm trying to understand the overage for planning and DSS.
Do you know which item that is with?
It is,
7.
I think so. 9.
Oh, we're looking at a transfer.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe these are just items that went over what we had budgeted for, but they're just coming from other operating line items.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just cleaning up the accounts, going from one operating to the other. These won't be coming from fund balance.
Okay. Okay.
And, with DSS too, I'd like to state that a lot of times at the beginning of the budget, we kind of estimate or guess what the caseload is going to look like. And some years are much busier than others. As you can see, we did need a little bit more money in our 4E foster care program and some other programs, adult services as well. But those are directly tied to the services that they provide.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Since there are 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, can we do all in one motion or we have to do it separate?
You can do them all in one motion. I would just list the appropriations specifically that you're approving. So move to approve FY20 supplemental appropriations, FY21 supplemental appropriations as presented.
I don't know why I asked you. Okay, thank you.
That's separate.
Yeah, number 10. Okay, so.
Fine too.
Okay, and the chair's entertain a motion for items 7, 8, and 9. Right? Or 7 and 8? 7 and 8.
Madam Chair, I move to approve FY20, 21 supplemental appropriations as presented.
Polling members, please.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye.
Yes. During round 1 of the CARES Act funding, we appropriated $66,800 for the schools to buy large thumb drives. And the intent was, at the beginning, is that the assignments would be loaded to thumb drives and then given to students. But they've changed the way they're doing instructions to an all virtual format. They no longer needed the thumb drives. But with the virtual format, all virtual format, they have recognized the needs for some kids that don't have adequate broadband. So they want to move that money to purchase more MiFi units to increase access throughout the community.
If no other question, we entertain a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the FY20 budget transfers as presented, and I move to approve the I'm sorry, it's not the budget, it's the interdepartmental. Let me start over.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Chair, I move to approve the FY20 interdepartmental budget transfers and the FY21 interdepartmental budget transfers as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye. Thank you. Item 11, Clean County Committee appointment. Mr. Evelyn.
Yes, Madam Chair. It's an honor to appoint Lily Graham to District 1's representative on the New Kent County Clean Committee to complete a 4-year term ending December 31st, 2022. Very talented young lady.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Evelyn. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the members, please?
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye. Number 12, Mr. Hathaway, you have any other business?
No, ma'am.
What? Okay, I'm not going to ask twice. And motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Our next meeting schedule, regular meeting schedule of the Board of Supervisors will be held at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, October the 13th, 2020, and the next work session will be at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, October the 27th, and both of them will be held here in Administration Boardroom. Ms. Watkins, will you poll the board members, please?
Mr. Evelyn?
Aye.
Mr. Tiller?
Aye.
Mr. Steers?
Aye.
Mr. Lockwood?
Aye.
And Ms. Page?
Aye. Thank you. Mr. Tiller? So, I'm so excited.